All right, we might just wait for a few others to pop on and then we'll get started. All right, I reckon let's get into it. So, hi everyone. Tonight I wanted to have a bit of a chat to everyone about the fundamentals of nutrition, and then talk a bit about nutrition around your training and how you can use nutrition and food choices to perform at your best and make sure you're also recovering properly to be able to continue training at your best. So, the first thing I wanted to talk about tonight was our macronutrients, as well as our micronutrients. And basically our macronutrients, they are our carbohydrates, our fats, and our protein. These three nutrients we need in larger amounts in our diet, and basically they provide the body with energy. So first of all, in terms of our carbohydrates are our body's main source of energy, and our brain's our brain's only source of energy. So really important that we are getting in some carbohydrates to make sure we're not just fueling our body, but also our mind. That's really important. In terms of carbohydrates, like I just mentioned, they're the body's main source of energy, and they are really important in exercise. So our body will use carbohydrates predominantly for endurance exercise, high intensity exercise, and any form of endurance events. So cycling, if you're going for runs during COVID and lockdown, they're going to be a really important part of your diet. Carbohydrates are going to be needed in greater amounts on those days that you do train. So by looking at the duration and the intensity of a training session might help just to identify whether you need to be upping the carbohydrates in your diet. So for those sessions that are longer in duration and higher in intensity, that's just a bit of note there to make sure that you're including snacks that are rich in carbohydrates on those days. Carbohydrates are really important for our health as well. So they're a great source of fiber, and we really want to be choosing those whole grain, whole meal options, not only for the fiber, but also the healthy fats that are found in those grains that play an important role in our health. Distributing carbohydrates across the day can also play a really important role in just keeping our blood sugar levels stable, which is really important in just preventing diabetes sort of later on, and when our blood sugars basically go up and down, which can happen if we're not sort of continually consuming some form of good quality carbohydrates throughout the day. That's when our risk of diabetes can increase, along with other factors as well. In terms of where our good sources of carbohydrates are found, they're basically found in all our whole grain and whole meal products. So all our brown rice, our whole grain breads and cereals, muesli bars, rolled oats, wholemeal couscous, noodles, wholemeal pasta, a lot of our fruits, as well as our starchy vegetables like sweet potato, even our beans and our legumes. They're great sources of carbohydrates as well as protein also. And there are some small amounts of carbohydrates found in our dairy products like milk, and even fruit flavored yogurt. In terms of our next macronutrient, we've got protein, and basically protein plays a really important role in health and keeping us functioning, as well as repairing and building muscle. So it is really important protein around training, and it's particularly needed after training to play that role in muscle repair and recovery and create those muscle adaptations like muscle strength and changes in our muscle fibers that will help with becoming fitter and improving our endurance capacity. So what I tend to usually recommend is including a source of protein at each main meal and also in at least one of our snacks throughout the day to make sure that we are getting an even distribution of protein throughout the day. Because I guess something that we don't want, and it's something that I see quite a bit, is people tend to not include too much protein at breakfast, so it's quite low. Then at lunch it becomes a little bit higher, and then at dinner we get this huge load of protein when people tend to be choosing, I guess, their meats and having that with dinner, and we get this huge sort of imbalanced load. So we do want to try and get our protein quite consistent across those 3 main meals, just so we are giving our body that constant supply of protein to help with recovery. And recovery from any training session is a 24 to 48 hour process. So if you are someone, or if you have clients or friends that train quite regularly, it is really important that they're aware of or you're aware of including protein regularly and distributed across the day. Protein is found in, like I mentioned before, so our meats, so our red meat, chicken, fish, and eggs. Also our dairy products, so like all of our milk, our cheeses, our yogurt, as well as some plant-based sources like tofu, our beans and legumes, as well as nut butters. There's heaps of those on the market these days, as well as nuts and seeds. The last macronutrient is fat, and basically fat is really important for our health and well-being, first of all. And this is, I'm talking our healthy sources of fat that have additional benefits that support our health. Fat's also needed for growth and development, so particularly for our adolescents. It's needed for the production of hormones, as well as the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. So they're vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K. And those healthy sources of fat also have some anti-inflammatory properties, which are really beneficial in terms of many things, and particularly for people that are struggling with rheumatoid arthritis. These anti-inflammatory properties in healthy fats like avocado, olive oil, canola oil, oily fish like salmon, nut butters, and nuts and seeds like chia seeds, flax seeds, and walnuts can be really beneficial in just helping with that, helping to reduce that inflammation. In terms of our micronutrients, so I just spoke about our macronutrients, which are needed in larger amounts and provide the body with energy. Our micronutrients, on the other hand, are needed in much smaller amounts and don't actually provide the body with any energy in the form of calories or kilojoules. So our micronutrients include things like our vitamins, so vitamin A, B, C, D, and many others. Our minerals like iron and calcium, which I will touch on today, and things like zinc, magnesium, as well as some of our antioxidants. In terms of the micronutrients that I wanted to cover, I really wanted to point out iron tonight, and that's basically because iron, it's quite commonly, people are quite, it's common that people are deficient in iron. So particularly, women, endurance athletes, that's because basically iron is needed to transport oxygen around the body. And when you think about it, the more you're contracting a muscle, the more iron that the body needs to be able to transport that oxygen around the body. And then there's also people following a vegetarian or vegan diet, which sort of struggle sometimes to get enough iron in their diet, as well as sort of absorb enough iron to maintain those stores. So basically, some symptoms that you can look out for are fatigue, poor sleep, and if you're feeling quite irritable, they may be some signs that you are deficient in iron. And I guess just some good food sources of iron include your animal products, so beef, lamb, eggs, chicken. They're really our key sources of iron, whereas we've also got some plant-based sources. And there are many plant-based sources of foods that provide iron. However, basically our animal products that contain iron, the iron in these products can be absorbed a lot more easily from the body in comparison to plant-based sources of iron. Now, plant-based sources include things like our beans, our lentils, our chickpeas, dried fruit, which can be a great snack if you're following a vegetarian or vegan diet, or someone that doesn't eat much other of those animal products that contain iron, as well as things like tofu, and our fortified cereals and milks can also have some iron in there. And basically another way that you can actually help maximize the amount of iron that you're absorbing from foods is that when you're going for a food containing iron, you can also pair that iron containing food with some food source that has vitamin C in it. So pairing, say, chicken or some beef at dinner with some capsicum that's high in vitamin C. Basically, that vitamin C is going to help maximize and draw as much iron out of that beef or chicken as possible. For someone maybe that's following a vegetarian or vegan diet, if you were having some Weet Bix for breakfast, maybe including some strawberries and kiwi fruit on top of your Weet Bix, just to help draw out that fortified iron in that cereal through that vitamin C in that fruit. So just something to be aware of. In terms of the other micronutrient that I wanted to touch on, our calcium. Basically, our calcium is needed for the development of strong bones and maintaining bone health. And in terms of food sources, a really common one, and one that we all tend to sort of associate calcium with, is our milk, yogurt and cheese. But basically there's more foods that actually contain calcium, and if you're someone that doesn't tend to have too much of those dairy products, including things like your green leafy veggies, so your spinach and broccoli, your fortified alternative milks can also be an option, so soy milk, almond milk, oat milk, just making sure that you are checking on the back of the nutritional panel that there is some calcium in there, because there are a few on the market that aren't. And I'd be looking for at least 120 milligrams per 100 mil. Nuts, so particularly almonds, are another great source of calcium, and canned salmon with bones are a really good one also. And it is important to just be aware of your calcium intake and make sure you are getting, the recommended serves of calcium in your diet, just particularly when you're someone that does train quite a bit, just to make sure that you are reducing any risk of injury or stress fractures. In terms of nutrition for performance, basically you definitely can manipulate your nutrition around your training to get the most out of your performance. So ideally to perform at your best and to make sure that you can do this for however long you need to. So if you've got, say, a rowing season, for example, or a soccer season coming up, you want to be performing your best, not just sort of around selection time and then for the first few weeks into the season, but you actually want to be able to maintain that performance across the season. And nutrition plays a really important role there, not only to help you perform at your best, but also actually make sure you're getting enough energy to fuel and feel good, not feel tired and fatigued and not be able to do other things outside your training, as well as also making sure that you're not putting yourself at any risk of injury. So basically, in terms of nutrition before a training session or before a game or a race, any form of training, what you want to be aiming for is to be consuming a main meal about 2 to 4 hours prior to that training session or that race. And basically the carbohydrates are going to be priority here, and that's basically to assist in fueling that session, so actually making sure you're going into that session with enough energy. And then including some form of protein as well is just going to be important to keep you full and satisfied, so you're not feeling hungry once you get to that training session. And it's also going to help with promoting muscle growth and preventing any muscle breakdown, which is common when you start exercising, because when you think about it, as soon as you start contracting those muscles, what the body naturally tends to do is want to break down, and we want to use protein through our diet to create that growth sort of phase, and that what we call our anabolic state, where we're building muscle rather than breaking muscle, and as well creating those adaptations in terms of strength. So in terms of what a main meal might look like, this could be some cereal with some low-fat milk and some fruit on top, a salad sandwich, so with some salad in there, some lean protein like chicken, and maybe some cheese as well. A burrito with some rice, some lean meat, some salad, some pasta with some tomato-based sauce, even a fruit smoothie, or a sausagen, or some sort of like meal replacement if you can't sort of tolerate much food sort of before exercising. Also peanut butter on toast with some banana on top and some honey might be a great option as either a breakfast or a lunch, depending on when you're training. The next sort of thing to think about is sort of a snack, and including a snack just as sort of a final top up before you're going into that training session. So generally around 30 minutes to 2 hours before that session, I'd be recommending having a snack. This should be high in carbohydrates as the last sort of opportunity to fuel before that session. And I always recommend it being low in fiber, especially if you struggle with a sensitive gut or feel nervous before training or a big race, and also low in fat to make sure it's easy to digest before that session, because you don't want something feeling really heavy and feeling uncomfortable, I guess, when you're going into a session. And basically fat and fiber, they digest quite slowly. So, we want to make sure our other nutrients as well getting digested and things aren't slowed down too much. Some ideas could be a muesli bar, a piece of fruit, a fruit flavored sort of squeezy yogurt as something to have on the go, some dried fruit, and homemade banana bread or muffins are always a good option as well. And maybe probably a big favorite of mine actually is rice cakes with some peanut butter and banana on top, or even jam and peanut butter on top of rice cakes is always a really good easy snack to carry around with you. In terms of what to have after performance, basically protein is priority here, and that's because it plays that role in muscle repair and muscle recovery. It is important to try and get something in that contains some protein as soon as possible after a session, just to start that recovery process off. So as well, just thinking about it, and I may have mentioned it before, recovery is a 24 to 48 hour process. So we want to start this recovery process off nice and as quickly as possible. So some options, if say you can't get home straight away and have the main meal, or for some reason you can't get it out wherever you are, snacks that are good choices to go for are things like a handful of nuts with a high protein yogurt, like Chobani or YoPro brands. Yeah, I love banana bread too, Lynn, how good. Also things like a high protein Carmen's muesli bar, some main meal options are again pasta with a meat-based sauce, burritos, and again just trying to think about making sure you've got some carbohydrates, some lean protein, then some colourful vegetables to get in those vitamins and minerals that are going to help with general and overall health. And then also including some healthy fats in there, because of course they may just so have those anti-inflammatory properties that are going to assist in that recovery. The last thing that I wanted to touch on tonight was vitamins and supplement use. So basically, in terms of vitamins, a lot of people tend to think, how can we maximize our performance? Do we need to be taking vitamins, supplements? What's going to help me perform at my best? So basically, just focusing on your macronutrients and your micronutrients is key and priority. The only reason you would need to take a vitamin supplement is if you've been formally diagnosed with a deficiency through your GP. So that might be something like vitamin D deficiency or iron deficiency. In terms of protein supplements, that's another question I get asked a lot. For example, are they necessary? Do I need to be including them? Are they going to help me? In terms of my recommendations, they're not necessary. You can definitely be meeting your protein requirements through a food first approach, and making sure you're getting some protein in your main meals and your snacks. But basically they can be really convenient if you are someone that is doing a lot of training, and you need something quite easy and convenient, and pretty quick to sort of prepare wherever you are. So they definitely can be included as part of your diet, particularly as well if you feel like you are struggling with that recovery process and you are feeling quite sore for a few days after training. Maybe just considering upping that protein intake and just making sure you're supporting that recovery as best as you can. But they were the few things I wanted to touch on tonight. Hopefully you got a few things out of this live and understand your macronutrients and those main micronutrients, iron and calcium, a little bit better. And if you've got any more questions sort of about nutrition around performance, now's sort of the chance if you wanted to ask any questions. Maybe sort of while I'm waiting for a few to pop up, there was a question that came through Instagram during the week, and it was, is it better to eat carbohydrates before a workout rather than afterwards? So basically, carbohydrates, I'll definitely be including them before exercise to make sure you're fueled and you've got enough energy going into that session. In terms of afterwards, I always tend to say protein is priority in that recovery process, but again, including some form of carbohydrates as well in that recovery is going to be important, just to make sure you're topping up all that fuel that you have lost. So they do definitely play a role before and after a session, but I would say, particularly beforehand, that's when you want to make sure you're getting some carbohydrates in. All right, I'll just make sure there's I will definitely be saving the live, so you can find that on Get Going's Instagram. All right, I don't think I've got any more questions, but hope you got some good takeaways there, and some information to go off for both health and performance. Any questions, feel free to send me a message, but thanks for everyone who tuned in.